On Tuesday, Major League Baseball writers for the Baseball Writers Association of America elected Scott Rowland, a former third baseman with the Cardinals, Phillies, Blue Jays, and Reds, to baseball's Hall of Fame. Now, Scott Rowland deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. He was one of the best third basemen to ever play. He had great numbers, and I have no problem with him getting in there. However, he was not a slam dunk. He was not like a Greg Maddux or a John Smoltz, Tom Glavine, that was kind of a no-brainer and is going to get in on the first ballot. It took Scott Rowland several ballots to get in, and that's always kind of weird to me. I don't know why people would either answer the question of whether or not a player is a Hall of Famer or not, and yet wait to vote on him later. That's really not made very much sense to me. Andrew Jones did not get in the Hall of Fame. He fell short once again, and all signs point to him getting in at some point, but not yet, which is crazy. To me, you're either a Hall of Famer or you're not. But a player like Scott Rowland and Harold Baines, who was elected a few years ago, does bring up to me once again the topic of Dale Murphy. Now, I will tell you that I'm not very objective when it comes to Dale Murphy. I grew up loving the man as he played for the Atlanta Braves from 1977 through 1990. Of course, that was when I was a kid. And now I actually know Dale Murphy and consider him a friend, which is not something I ever could have imagined, but it's true. So I'm not very objective, but this has nothing to do with the fact that Dale Murphy is a great guy, which he is. It's about what Dale Murphy did on the field. Now, Dale Murphy's in another category. He's not voted on by the writers anymore. He's voted on by a committee that actually just put Fred McGriff in, and that's a whole nother story, because the fact that the writers did not put Fred McGriff in, that was crazy in itself. But to see Dale Murphy still be on the outside looking in is still incredible, and Scott Rowland's numbers does kind of bring that back to the forefront. Now, there are a lot of comparisons that you can make with players. We know that now analytics come into play where they'll bring up the WAR, wins above replacement, what that player may do compared to another player, and how that may judge whether or not he's a Hall of Fame player. I get that. But the one thing that I've never been able to understand is that Dale Murphy was an MVP for 2 straight years. For 2 years in a row, 1982 and 1983, Dale Murphy was the best player in the National League. And I don't think there is any debate that in the 1980s, Dale Murphy, along with players like Andre Dawson and Jim Rice, Mike Schmidt, Dale Murphy was one of the best players in the sport for that decade. And yet he still is not in baseball's Hall of Fame. Now, his batting average is 265. Okay, that's not great. I get it. But Dale Murphy, again, 7-time All-Star, 2-time MVP, 5 Gold Glove awards, 4 Silver Slugger awards, 2-time home run leader in the National League, 2-time RBI leader in the National League, 398 home runs, and yet he can't get in. But we know, we watched Dale Murphy, that he was one of the best talents in the sport. He played the game the right way. He ran hard. He ran fast. He had a 30-30 year where he had 30 steals and 30 home runs the same year. That didn't used to happen 40 years ago very often. He ran the bases well, could steal a base, had great defense as evidenced by his 5 Gold Gloves. He was a great fielder in all 3 positions, left, center, and right. And of course, he could hit home runs and was a dependable player. Now, Dale Murphy had injuries toward the end of the year of his career, and that contributed to his numbers not getting over certain levels, like 400 home runs. It's silly to ask, but would Dale Murphy and his candidacy for the Hall of Fame look totally different if he had hit 2 more home runs? If he had had 400 home runs instead of 398? It's like asking about Fred McGriff. Fred McGriff had just under 500 home runs. Would his candidacy have been easier to get into the Hall of Fame if he had had 6 more home runs? And yet we know that the 1994 strike cost him from getting that even in that time period, and of course injuries as well. So the Hall of Fame is weird. It is hard to really judge whether or not a player should or shouldn't be in there because of all these different players that are getting in now. But I think we are not very objective, and yet we can say very strongly that Dale Murphy was one of the best players of the 1980s. He was a 2-time MVP award, and at some point, he needs to get into Cooperstown.